The distress beacon pulsed in the darkness, an artificial heartbeat against the silence of Xal'Zyr Prime. The planet, long abandoned, was a graveyard of forgotten wars, where twisted metal jutted from the ground like skeletal remains, and the air carried the acrid scent of decay. It was a place where only the desperate ventured, or the doomed. Commander Xal'Zyr stood at the edge of the impact crater, his elongated pupils narrowing against the pale blue glow of the escape pod's emergency lights. The ship's hull was scorched, half buried in the cracked ground. Steam hissed from ruptured conduits, and faint scratches marred the metal. Not from the crash, he noted grimly. Something had tried to get in. We shouldn't be here, hissed Rillick, the squad's weapons specialist. His three-fingered hands gripped his plasma rifle, the barrel twitching with nervous energy. Distress calls from dead worlds? This is how people disappear. Sorry, I agreed. But orders were orders. Aboard the Xal'Zyr, the distress signal had been weak, fragmented. A single life sign. A human. Even out here, in the lawless fringe of space, humans had a reputation. Warriors. Survivors. Dangerous. Dr. Alira knelt by the pod's hatch, her diagnostic scanner humming. Life signs are stable, she said. Her voice was measured, though tension lurked beneath the surface. The pod's been active for 3 days. Whoever's inside, they're lucky to be alive. Or unlucky. With a hiss of decompressing air, the hatch opened. Inside, crumpled against the seat, was a man, broad-shouldered, his flight suit torn, a gash across his temple. But what seized Xal'Zyr's attention was not the human. It was the thing beside him. A massive, wolf-like creature, its fur a blend of black and steel gray, stirred at the intrusion. Cybernetic implants gleamed along its spine, its left eye replaced with a dimly glowing red lens. It did not snarl, did not lunge, but its muscles tensed beneath its thick coat, coiled with predatory restraint. Alira, Xal'Zyr started, but the medic was already moving. She knelt cautiously, fingers brushing the human's throat. Pulses strong. She reached for a med-gel applicator. A growl. Low. Reverberating. Alira froze. The creature's singular red eye locked onto her, unblinking. Steady, Xal'Zyr warned. His hand hovered near his sidearm, though he doubted it would do much. Cybernetic enhancements meant the beast was engineered, modified, likely a combat unit. Alira slowly withdrew her hand. I need to treat him, she murmured, shifting her gaze to Xal'Zyr. If he doesn't wake up, he won't last. The commander exhaled sharply. Do it. Rillick, cover her. Rillick didn't lower his rifle, but he nodded. Alira moved with calculated slowness, applying the gel over the man's wound. The effect was almost immediate, the bleeding slowed, skin knitting together. She pressed a stim injector against his arm. The human inhaled sharply. His body jerked. Then his eyes snapped open. His gaze was sharp, assessing. Not the sluggish confusion of someone just waking, but the clarity of a soldier forced into consciousness by instinct alone. Before anyone could react, he moved. Faster than expected, he was on his feet, his stance dropping into a combat-ready position. His eyes flicked from Alira to Xal'Zyr to Rillick, noting weapons, assessing threats. And then, finally, they settled on the beast beside him. The tension in his shoulders loosened, fractionally. Easy, Alira said, hands raised. You were in an escape pod. You crashed. We're here to help. His jaw tightened. Where? Xal'Zyr Prime, Xal'Zyr answered. The name landed like a blow. A flicker of something crossed the human's face. Recognition, alarm, calculation. Then you shouldn't have come, he said, voice hoarse but steady. The air grew heavier. What? Xal'Zyr asked. The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced past them, to the jagged skyline beyond the crater. His right hand dropped to the creature's head, fingers curling briefly into its fur. A silent command. The beast stood. Xal'Zyr, and his squad stiffened. "You have a ship?" the human asked. Sorry, I hesitated. "Yes." The human exhaled, as if measuring his words. Then we need to leave. Now." Before Sorry I could question him further, a sound cut through the wind. A deep, resonant click, click, click. Rillick turned sharply, weapon raised. What was that? The human's expression darkened. "It's here." A shadow moved at the edge of the crater. Something huge. The blue emergency lights flickered, and for a brief, terrible moment, they saw it. Eyes. Too many of them, reflecting the dim light like shattered glass. And then it was gone. A deathly silence settled. The air felt too still. The human turned to Sorry I, urgency bleeding into his voice. "If you want to live, don't run. Don't turn your back. And never." A screech tore through the stillness. The ground trembled. Metal groaned. Rillick swung his rifle up, scanning the darkness. What the? Something struck. A blur of movement. A flash of claws. Rillick barely had time to scream before he was gone, yanked into the shadows as if he'd never been there. Alira gasped, stumbling back. Sorry I's heart slammed against his ribs. The beast beside the human, Fenrir, snarled, its fur bristling, red eye pulsing with light. "We have to go." Alira choked out. "No," the human said grimly, drawing a sleek, compact firearm from his belt. His movements were fluid, practiced, not panicked, just ready. "If we run," he said, "it'll pick us off one by one." Sorry I forced himself to focus. "What is it?" The human's grip tightened on his weapon. "The thing that hunts this planet," he said. "A Xal'Zyr. It was made to kill." Another sound, this time closer. A rasping exhale. A shape moving just beyond sight. Sorry I's mind raced. His squad was trained for combat, but this was something else. "We get to the ship," he ordered, forcing control into his voice. "Move in formation. No one falls behind." But the human shook his head. "It won't let us." The words settled over them like ice. Another sound, closer this time. A whispering noise, almost laughing. Alira swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" The human exhaled, lifting his gun, his beast at his side. "We make our stand." The silence that followed was suffocating. The wind howled through the ruins, but beneath it, something else moved, something deliberate, measured. Sorry I forced himself to breathe evenly, his mind racing through tactical calculations. Rillick was gone, taken so fast there hadn't even been a flash of plasma fire. A soldier erased in a blink. And now, whatever had done it was still out there, watching, waiting. Alira clutched her medical kit, her breath unsteady. The human, still standing firm beside his cybernetic beast, scanned the darkness. His expression remained unreadable, but his fingers were taut around the grip of his weapon. The beast, Fenrir, was motionless, every muscle primed for the kill. Then the whispering began. At first, it was unintelligible, low murmurs swirling in the air, a mimicry of voices just beyond recognition. Then it changed. "Help me." The words came in Rillick's voice. Alira choked on a breath. She turned toward the darkness, scanning the jagged wreckage, her wide eyes desperate for something. Anything. Human. "Alira, please." It was unmistakable. His voice. Weak, trembling. She took a step forward. The human's hand shot out, clamping around her wrist. His grip was iron. "Don't," he warned, voice low. She struggled against him, eyes burning. "That's Rillick. We can't just." "That's not Rillick." His voice was as cold as the grave. And then the whispering stopped. A sharp, clicking sound broke the air. A hunting signal. The temperature seemed to drop. Sorry I gritted his teeth, forcing his focus back to their immediate reality. His mind screamed for an exit plan, a strategy, anything to get them out of this intact. "You know this thing," he said to the human. "Tell me how we kill it." The human's eyes flicked toward him. "You don't." A shape shifted in the periphery, a blur moving too fast for the eye to track. A shadow sliding between the wreckage, effortlessly weaving through the ruins. Sari's pulse slammed against his throat. His squad had faced predators before, biomechanical horrors, war beasts bred for slaughter. But this was different. This thing enjoyed the hunt. Then how do we survive? He demanded. The human exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving the darkness. We changed the game. Before Sarai could question him, the human moved. Not away. Forward. He stepped toward the wreckage, his cybernetic beast pacing at his side. It thinks we're prey, he said. It expects us to run, scatter. That's how it wins. That's how it's always won. His weapon shifted in his hands. A sleek, matte black firearm, smaller than a plasma rifle but undeniably lethal. He pressed something on the side, and the barrel split open with a quiet hiss, adjusting to a new configuration. But what happens when prey doesn't run? The growl that followed was impossibly deep, vibrating through the air. It came from everywhere, surrounding them, pressing in like an unseen force. The human tilted his head slightly, as if listening, and then he fired. A single, deafening shot. A pulse round erupted from the barrel, illuminating the wreckage in a burst of electric blue light. The creature moved. It wasn't just fast, it was wrong. Its motion defied the natural order, limbs twisting as it contorted away from the shot. But for the first time, it had been forced to react. And it hated that. The growl turned into a screeching roar, and then the shadows collapsed inward. A blur of black and crimson launched from the wreckage. Sarai had only a heartbeat to register the sheer size of it. Easily 3 meters tall, elongated limbs ending in jagged talons. Its form was an unnatural blend of sinew and armored plating, its many eyes glinting with a sickly amber glow. Its mouth, if it could even be called that, was an amalgamation of shifting mandibles, rows of needle-like teeth clicking hungrily. Fenrir moved first. The cybernetic beast lunged, a blur of muscle and metal. It struck the creature mid-air, jaws locking onto its twisted form. The impact sent them both crashing through the ruins, a cacophony of snarls and shredding metal. Alira moved. Sarai barked. She snapped out of her daze and scrambled back as the human surged forward, weapon raised. He didn't fire blindly. Each shot was calculated, aimed at joints, weak points. Plasma rounds slammed into the creature's carapace, sizzling on impact, but failing to penetrate deep enough to stop it. The creature shrieked, not in pain, in rage. It twisted, flinging Fenrir aside with bone-crushing force. The cybernetic beast slammed into a rusted pillar, the impact reverberating through the ruins. It didn't move. Then the creature turned its gaze to the human. It lunged. The human barely evaded, twisting at the last second. The creature's talons sliced through the air where he had been moments before. He rolled, pivoted, brought his weapon up. Too slow. A clawed hand slammed into him, sending him skidding across the debris-littered ground. Blood splattered the dirt. Sarai didn't hesitate. He raised his own rifle, firing rapid bursts of plasma. The creature twisted, avoiding most of the shots, but one struck its shoulder. It barely flinched. It turned its gaze on him, and then it spoke. Your fear is loud. The voice was layered, distorted, as if a dozen voices spoke in unison. Sarai's blood turned to ice. The human coughed, pushing himself to his knees. His lip was split, blood dripping down his chin. But he was smiling. The creature hesitated. Sarai didn't understand, until he saw what the human was holding. A small, sleek device, barely the size of his palm. A blinking red light. The human's smile widened, teeth stained crimson. Gotcha. He pressed the detonator. The ruins erupted. A chain reaction of explosives hidden in the wreckage detonated in a blinding cascade. Shockwaves tore through the battlefield, sending debris flying. The creature screamed, this time in genuine pain, as fire and shrapnel engulfed it. Sorry-Eye ducked behind cover, shielding Alira as the force of the explosion roared past them. The ground trembled. Then, silence. Smoke and dust choked the air. The wreckage was nothing but a burning ruin. Sorry-Eye coughed, pushing himself up. His ears rang. His body ached. But he was alive. And so was the human. The man staggered to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. His cybernetic beast limped toward him, battered but still breathing. Alira exhaled shakily. Did we? A single, jagged claw slammed into the ground. Sorry-Eye's heart stopped. The smoke shifted. A silhouette loomed. Burned, bleeding, but still standing. Still smiling. Not dead, just angry. The human spat blood and rolled his shoulders. Well, he muttered, raising his weapon again. Guess round 2 starts now. The creature stepped forward, emerging from the haze of fire and smoke, its form silhouetted against the burning wreckage. Its outer plating had been scorched, sections of its armored hide cracked and smoldering. The explosion had hurt it, but not enough. It stood taller now, unfazed, its unnatural eyes reflecting the chaos around it with a sickening hunger. Sorry-Eye's grip tightened around his weapon. His pulse pounded against his skull, his instincts screaming at him to move, to run. But he held his ground. Running wouldn't save them. Nothing would, unless they finished this now. The human spat blood onto the ground, rolling his shoulders. You just don't know when to die, do you? The creature tilted its head, watching him with eerie amusement. Then it raised one twisted limb and pointed directly at him. You, it rasped. The sound was wrong, layered with multiple voices, as if something else was speaking through it. You have ruined the game. Its voice slithered into their minds, pressing against their thoughts like an unseen hand. Sorry-Eye fought the urge to recoil, pushing back against the invasive presence. Beside him, Alira shuddered, her hands tightening around her medical kit, knuckles white. Fenrir let out a low, guttural growl, his cybernetic eye flashing ominously. Even wounded, the beast positioned itself in front of the human, ready to fight again. The human, unfazed, merely exhaled. You're right, he said coolly. I don't play by your rules. He moved. Faster than Sorry-Eye had anticipated, the human surged forward, his weapon flashing as he fired off a rapid succession of shots. Each pulse round was aimed with deadly precision, targeting the weakened joints and fractures in the creature's exoskeleton. The plasma burst seared into its flesh, forcing it back, but it didn't falter. Instead, it countered. It moved. One moment it was standing before them. The next, it was everywhere. A blur of shifting limbs and twisting shadows, too fast for the eye to follow. It weaved between the ruins, phasing in and out of sight, a ghost of death circling its prey. Sorry-Eye barely had time to react before it was there, slamming into the human with monstrous force. The impact sent him hurtling backward, his weapon flying from his grip as he crashed against a collapsed pillar. The beast pounced after him, but Fenrir intercepted. The cybernetic wolf leaped, fangs bared, sinking its jaws deep into the creature's arm. The thing shrieked, a hideous, distorted sound, before it twisted unnaturally, its free limbs slamming into Fenrir's side with devastating force. The beast yelped as it was flung away, skidding across the rubble. Sorry-Eye fired. His plasma rifle screamed as he let loose a volley of shots, forcing the creature's attention back onto him. Alira followed suit, switching her medical tool into its secondary function, a high-intensity energy scalpel. She hurled it, the blade spinning through the air, slicing a clean gash across the monster's hide before embedding itself in the wreckage. It barely reacted. It was toying with them. The human staggered to his feet, breathing hard. Blood dripped from a fresh wound on his forehead, but his eyes burned with something feral. Something Sarai recognized. Survivor's rage. The human flexed his fingers, adjusting his stance. "All right," he muttered. "You want to fight? Let's go." Sarai didn't know what the human was planning, but he didn't hesitate. He moved in tandem, flanking left, forcing the creature to split its attention. Fenrir, despite its injuries, mirrored them, stalking low, waiting for an opening. The creature exhaled, its jagged mouth shifting into something almost resembling a smile. "You do not understand," it murmured, stepping forward. "This is not your world." Its many eyes gleamed. "This is my hunting ground." And then it attacked. It moved with terrifying speed, targeting Elira first. She barely had time to react before it was on her, claws swiping for her throat. Sarai tackled her aside, taking the brunt of the impact himself. The creature's strike carved through his armor, pain lancing across his ribs. He hit the ground hard, rolling with the force of the blow. The human seized the distraction. He dove for his fallen weapon, snatching it up in one fluid motion. But instead of firing, he twisted a dial on the side of the gun, changing its configuration. The barrel expanded, vents hissing as it powered up. A final shot. The human planted his feet, leveling the weapon at the creature. His voice was calm, controlled. "Burn." He pulled the trigger. The modified pulse rifle unleashed a concentrated, searing white beam. The shot wasn't just plasma. It was something else, something designed to end things. It struck the creature dead center. For the first time, the Xal'Zyr screamed. Its body convulsed, writhing as the beam carved through its form, searing its twisted flesh. Black ichor splattered against the rubble, sizzling on contact. Its many eyes flickered wildly, its distorted voice screeching in agony. It stumbled. Then, impossibly, it began to regenerate. Sarai's breath caught. "It's healing." The human was already moving. He grabbed a rusted, jagged metal beam from the wreckage and ran, straight at the beast. The creature, still reeling from the shot, barely reacted in time. The human lunged, driving the makeshift spear deep into its core. The metal sank through charred flesh and into whatever passed for a heart. A shriek tore through the air, echoing across the wasteland. The Xal'Zyr convulsed violently. Its limbs spasmed, its body trying to reject the fatal wound. But the metal remained lodged deep, cutting through its ability to regenerate. The human twisted the weapon cruelly. "Stay. Dead." The creature let out a final, shuddering exhale. Then it collapsed. Its body convulsed one last time before it went still, its unnatural eyes dimming, flickering out like dying stars. Silence. The only sound was the wind howling through the ruins. Sarai breathed hard, staring at the unmoving corpse. His mind struggled to process what had just happened. Elira coughed weakly, pressing a hand against her ribs. "Is it gone?" The human exhaled, stepping back from the body. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he simply turned toward his injured companion. Fenrir stirred. The cybernetic wolf let out a low whine, shifting weakly. The human knelt beside him, placing a steady hand on his head. "You did good, buddy," he murmured. The beast's red. I flickered dimly in response. Sarai swallowed the lump in his throat. "That thing." He gestured at the creature's corpse. "You knew what it was." The human didn't look up. "Yeah." Elira frowned. "And you knew how to kill it." A pause. Then, finally, the human met their gazes. "Not kill," he corrected. His expression was grim. "Just delay." And then the corpse twitched. The sound was faint at first, a sickening, wet crackle like bones shifting beneath too thin skin. Then the corpse spasmed. Not a reflex. Not the final twitch of a dying thing. A movement with purpose. Sarai didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The plasma round struck true, burning into the creature's skull. But there was no death cry this time, no final shriek of agony. The shot fizzled, absorbed by the thickening black ichor oozing from its wounds. Then its head turned. Slowly, deliberately. The human swore under his breath. "You have got to be kidding me." The Xal'Zyr's body convulsed violently, limbs snapping back into place with grotesque efficiency. The makeshift spear lodged in its chest twisted, as if something beneath its flesh was rejecting the foreign object. With a sickening squelch, the metal beam was pushed out, clattering to the ground. Elira took a trembling step back. "This isn't possible." "It never is," the human muttered. The creature rose. Its already distorted form became something worse, something fluid, like flesh and shadow were struggling to coexist. Its many eyes pulsed with renewed malice, its shredded armor reforming in jagged, unnatural patterns. It wasn't just healing, it was evolving. Fenrir growled weakly, dragging himself to his feet despite his battered state. The cybernetic beast bared his teeth, but there was hesitation in his stance. Even he understood, this thing had crossed a threshold. Sarai clenched his jaw. Tactical assessments flashed through his mind, each one pointing to the same conclusion. This battle had just gone from unwinnable to suicidal. And yet, the human was smiling. Not a cocky grin, not bravado. Something colder, more resigned, like he had been expecting this. Sarai stared at him. "You knew." The human didn't deny it. Elira's breath hitched. "Why didn't you say anything?" The human glanced at her, then at Fenrir, his expression unreadable. Because knowing wouldn't have changed the outcome. The Xal'Zyr twitched again, then moved. No hesitation, no games. It lunged, its form dissolving into a streak of black, faster than before. Fenrir reacted first, throwing himself in front of his companion. The creature's clawed hand slammed into the cybernetic beast, sending him flying. The human didn't flinch. In one fluid motion, he reached down, grabbed something from his belt, and hurled it at the ground. A detonator. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was precise. A blinding flash of electromagnetic energy erupted in all directions, momentarily short-circuiting every piece of tech in the immediate area, including the creature. The Xal'Zyr screamed, its body flickering, its unnatural regeneration halting as the electromagnetic pulse disrupted whatever dark energy kept it tethered together. That was the opening. Sarai didn't wait for orders. He fired, his rifle roaring as plasma rounds tore into the stunned monstrosity. Elira followed, her emergency sidearm spitting charged bursts of energy. The human didn't bother with a gun. He ran, straight toward the creature. Sarai barely had time to process the sheer recklessness before he saw why. The explosion had destabilized the wreckage around them. The ground beneath the Xal'Zyr was crumbling, giving way to the underground tunnels buried beneath the ruins. And the human was going to make sure it fell. He reached the creature just as it regained control. It lashed out, claws ripping toward his throat. But the human ducked. With brutal efficiency, he tackled the monster mid-lunge, forcing all his weight against it. The already unstable ground buckled beneath them. The Xal'Zyr shrieked as it tumbled backward into the darkness below. But it wasn't alone. The human was falling with it. Sarai moved before he could think. He lunged forward, arm outstretched, fingers barely catching the human's wrist as he plummeted. For a breathless moment, they hung there, Sarai straining against the weight, the human's body dangling over the abyss. Below, the Xal'Zyr clawed at the crumbling tunnel walls, trying to stop its descent. Elira scrambled to Sarai's side, grabbing his other arm to help pull. "Hold on," she gasped. The human looked up at them. His grip was firm, but his expression said everything. "Let go." Sarai's eyes widened. "No." The human's lips quirked upward, just slightly. "I wasn't asking." Then he let go. His fingers uncurled from Sarai's grip, and he dropped. Sarai roared in protest, lunging forward, But it was too late. The human plummeted into the darkness, vanishing into the collapsing ruins below. The Xal'Zyr's shriek echoed one last time before the tunnels caved in entirely, burying them both beneath tons of rubble. Then silence. Only the sound of wind howling through the desolate battlefield remained. Alira stared at the destruction, her face pale, her breaths shallow. Sorry, I said nothing. Fenrir limped toward the edge, staring down into the ruins, his mechanical eye flickering. His body swayed slightly, as if uncertain what to do. Then, without warning, the cybernetic beast lifted his head and let out a low, mournful howl. The sound carried through the wasteland, raw and aching. Alira turned away, squeezing her eyes shut. Sorry, I exhaled, forcing himself to push down the gnawing weight in his chest. The battle was over. But the war. He looked at the wreckage one last time, then at Fenrir. The cybernetic beast had stopped howling. He stood still, silent, waiting. And then, as if deciding something for himself, he turned and walked away. Not aimless, not lost, waiting for his human to come back. Sorry, I didn't stop him. He didn't have the heart to.